There are few characters in Elden Ring we never get to meet. The majority of the players in the Lands Between have their presence felt through the world, and when we finally face them, it's a satisfying encounter. Even Mikola, who we learned so much about through his lore, can be met in person after defeating Mohg. While he may be nothing more than an arm falling from a cocoon, we can stand in the presence of the boy Malenia once called the fiercest Empyrean. However, there is a character who had a major effect on the lives of many who studied the sword both within and beyond the Lands Between. Today we're going to take a look at someone we never meet in our journey, an enigmatic swordsman who not only bears a connection to the goddess of Rot herself, but to the warrior starting class. This blind swordsman is never given a name, but through various items, we can piece together his story and feel his effect on the Lands Between, including one of the gameplay abilities unique to Elden Ring. Welcome back to Square Table Gaming and our Elden Lore series. If you've visited us before and haven't subscribed, please consider doing so. In these videos, we focus on making high-quality content that fleshes out the stories hidden throughout the Lands Between, and we always pay attention to the comments, so we can bring our community the stories they want to hear. If you end up liking this video, or if you find something else that catches your interest in our playlist, we hope you'll support the channel and help boost us even further in YouTube's algorithm. We've recently reached 30k subscribers, and while we know that sub count is becoming more and more of a vanity metric, it's cool to see how many people consider us worth their time and attention. So if we've ever made a piece of content you've enjoyed, please help us on our road to 50k. With that said, let's return to our story. The first time we read about the Blind Swordsman is likely while we're in Stormveil Castle. When exploring the room where Gostok locks us in the dark with a banished knight, we open a chest containing the curved sword Talisman. This item is described as a talisman depicting a curved sword and a swordsman, enhances guard counters. It is said that a blind swordsman was the originator of this technique, the art of allowing one's opponent to strike so as to leave them vulnerable to a well-timed reply. This story can easily be written off as a flourish, a fun piece of flavor text that gives some meaning behind the new gameplay mechanic of guard counters. However, other items can be found during our exploration of the world that make it clear that the person depicted in this talisman is more important than you're led to believe. While the armor itself doesn't mention the blind swordsman, the curved sword talisman does show us that they wore the blue cloth cowl, the starting equipment for the warrior class. This armor tells us it is the cowl or vest of a nomadic warrior. The blue color of its fabric symbolizes brisk waters, as fluid and flowing as the sword in the hand of its wearer. Just as still waters turn foul, stagnation leads to decay. Warriors must remain ever drifting. The talisman is meant to depict this specific blind swordsman, and the fact that their cowl is used for any who walk the path of the warrior should speak toward the impact this person had on those who study swords. The knowledge of remaining ever drifting likely came directly from the original master, and the allusion to still water becoming foul and leading to decay may even speak to the connection between this swordsman and the goddess of Rot herself, Malenia, but we'll dive deeper into their story later. The Blue Dancer charm, which can be found when defeating the Guardian Golem in the High Road Cave, sheds more light on the life of this nomadic swordsman. A cloth doll depicting a dancer garbed in blue, an ancient heirloom of some sort, raises attack power with lower equipment load. The dancer in blue represents a fairy, who in legend bestowed a flowing sword upon a blind swordsman. Blade in hand, the swordsman sealed away an ancient god, a god that was Rot itself. This story has a lot to unpack, but we'll start with the clear connection to our topic. First, this blind swordsman was granted a flowing sword, and when we consider the other water verbiage used in the warrior set, we can clearly see a pattern that speaks to this being the same person. Next, the dancer in blue is representative of a fairy, which as far as we can find, does not exist in the Lands Between. Perhaps the use of a fairy in the story was meant to add a bit of whimsy or a fantastical aspect to entertain the children who want to know the tales of the Blind Swordsman. But whoever gave them their blade was the inspiration behind the blue-colored warrior armor. Last, we learn the swordsman sealed away the god of rot at some point during their journey. The legitimacy of this claim is entirely up to speculation, but we do have some idea of what this could mean. What we think is most interesting about this story is that we can find the flowing curved sword ourselves when exploring the consecrated snowfields, the very weapon that once belonged to the Blind Swordsman. This blade comes with the following description. Legends speak of a master of the sword garbed in blue, and his curved blade that was patterned after flowing water. Strong attack unleashes a series of strikes akin to a dance, offering a glimpse into the legend. While it's empowering to find and wield this weapon knowing the stories of the Blind Swordsman, what's more interesting is how we obtain it. When making our way through the consecrated snowfield, we come across one of the large black carriages being pulled by trolls that contains a treasure chest. Within this chest is the flowing curved sword, but more importantly, this sword is seen as so important it was actually guarded by 2 members of the Knight's Cavalry. Not only does this speak to the reverence that those in the lands between have for the swordsman, it also tells us that this person is no longer with us. While it hasn't been officially confirmed to our knowledge, many see the black carriages as a funeral procession. If this is the case, the Blind Swordsman's remains are likely housed within the carriage, meaning at some point he met his end. We know those in the lands between can't seem to die from old age, as without the rune of death, they have some level of immortality, so he must have fallen in battle, and this is where we fall more heavily into the realm of speculation. Upon completing a portion of Gowry's quest and speaking with Millicent, we are given the Prosthesis-Wearer heirloom. This item is described as a talisman engraved with a scene from a heroic tale, raises dexterity. Though born into the accursed rot, when the young girl encountered her mentor and his flowing blade, she gained wings of unparalleled strength. When looking at the item itself, it is engraved with the very moment where Malenia met the Blind Swordsman, and while they don't seem to be wearing the warrior set, all of the lore surrounding them makes it clear that this is who the talisman is depicting. From this point, we believe there are multiple explanations for the relationship between the two. The talisman describes the Blind Swordsman as Malenia's mentor, and they seem cordial in its depiction. The easy explanation here is that she studied under this swordsman as his apprentice, learning how to fight under his tutelage, and even developing the waterfowl dance based on the Blind Swordsman's own spinning slash and dance-like heavy attacks. In this interpretation, we can assume that the swordsman's history with defeating a previous aspect of the god of rot led them to teach Malenia to control the rot within her through the practice of the sword. Hence her studies under him leading to her being granted wings of unparalleled strength. Her time studying with the Blind Swordsman would have helped her harness her strength and keep the rot at bay, but also taught her to use this power to her advantage should she ever need it. This story puts forward a more wholesome relationship between the two, but it does leave the question of how the Blind Swordsman died open-ended. There is another interpretation of their relationship that could speak to a much more violent end. The Blind Swordsman's enemy was the god of rot, and he was said to have sealed it away. The only avatar for the god of rot that we've encountered or read stories about is Malenia herself. If we look at their encounter through a different lens, perhaps when Malenia refers to the Blind Swordsman as her mentor, she simply means she admired his swordsmanship. It's possible these two met not to train as master and apprentice, but as combatants on the battlefield. If the Blind Swordsman sought to lock away the rot, a confrontation with Malenia would have been inevitable, so perhaps she's the reason he's gone and left his sword behind. If you believe that our fight with Malenia was her third bloom, turning her into the goddess of rot, then we still can't account for her first bloom. Perhaps it was during her encounter with the Blind Swordsman that Malenia bloomed for the first time, gaining her wings, so to speak, and came to understand the power the rot afforded her. During their battle, the Blind Swordsman may have fought hard enough to seal the power of Malenia after her first bloom, but as we know, Malenia has never known defeat, and sealing her strength would come at the cost of the Blind Swordsman's life. For Malenia, this is a win-win. She comes to understand her full potential, and the rot is kept at bay. She would then show her respect for the swordsman by having his remains pulled by a carriage to their final resting place, with his beautiful flowing sword tucked away in a protected chest, laid to rest with his body. The story of this nomadic warrior, this blind swordsman, would become legend both within and beyond the lands between. Those who traveled the world studying the blade would come to wear a recreation of his armor, and wield scimitars and the riveted wooden shield so that they could better emulate his fighting style. Perhaps the reason this story takes on a more fairy tale tone is because it's been passed down time and again, slightly warping the truth behind it. There may not have been a fairy. Maybe this swordsman never truly locked away the rod. Maybe they simply found the sword in their travels. But the tale of the blind swordsman, who was granted a divine weapon to smite an outer god, brought hope and inspiration to those who needed it most. And maybe that's all the legacy this swordsman needs. Thank you for joining us for this week's Lore Dive. What do you think of our look at the story of the blind swordsman who wandered the lands between? Why do you think he's depicted with so much water and flowing imagery? Was he tarnished? Did he train Malenia, or do you believe they met in battle? Do you think he even existed at all? Let us know in the comments so we can all speculate on this story together. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss out on any of our lore dives. We look forward to seeing you again for more Elden Lore.